everyone, and welcome back, or for the first time, to Nerd Bible Podcast. In the run up to Deadpool and Wolverine, we are doing our retrospective review thoughts. We've probably said it at the time, but we're just focusing on Deadpool and Logan. The last times we saw these characters. So it's nice because we've never actually done like a full on what this is coming out. So let's talk about this.
No. I mean, that's the thing. It's good that we're doing it beforehand because come Deadpool and Wolverine, the whole planet the internet will be swarmed with spoilers, faults, and we kind of want to be one of the first, or at least get the topic going before the release, and get buzzed about the two coolest motherfuckers coming back to the business.
Let's fucking go.
Yeah, let's fucking go.
Close me window. Right. So news, nothing matters. Nothing in the whole universe, nothing in the whole MCU matters because Marvel Jesus is right here. Do you want to start with did you want to just do Deadpool, Logan and Deadpool 2, or do you want to just do Deadpool 2 and Logan? Like, how are you?
I feel like not that we would distinguish Deadpool 1 and 2 at all, but I feel like you can't not talk about one without talking about the other.
Exactly. That's why, because I was just going to do the last time. Like, when I was watching them, I was only going to watch the last time we saw both characters. But then Deadpool 2 is such a hyper extension of Deadpool 1 that it's kind of it's hard to not sort of talk about. But then it would be like, well, do you talk about the whole Wolverine trilogy? No, because we've kind of done that before. We've done all the X-Men films. I would love to do sort of a retrospective on like each group of films, like your first three, your Wolverine trilogy, your First Class bullshit, like anything after First Class, Days of Future Past and all that shit.
And I feel like even if we had way more time, we could have then done every appearance by Ryan Reynolds ever, and especially between Deadpool 2 and, well, I guess now, and talk about how wonderful Ryan Reynolds is and where the fuck Hugh's been. But we don't need to because we're only here straight to the business, talking about their two best roles, arguably. Well, I think for me, it's definitely Hugh Jackman's best, or one of his best roles.
It's the roles they're probably most synonymous with. I think it's grim to think, but when the obituary is written of these gentlemen, it will obviously be mentioned that they were Wolverine and Deadpool. It's like it's like what David Tennant used to say. It's like it's quite scary that like this kind of like when you talk about Doctor Who, like this will be the thing that you'll be remembered for the most when you die, sort of thing. But it's also quite it's always going to be something like you're always going to be loved by a portion of the fans, the planet out there. Like I don't think there's anyone that I've ever sort of met that doesn't like their versions of these characters.
Yeah.
Yes, Hugh Jackman is 6 foot and not however tall Wolverine's meant to be in the comics. But other than that, I think it's synonymous that to the point where they wanted to recast, but then it was like, but if we recast everyone, we lose Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. So it's kind of like they've always kind of tried to then do the continuity around that, which has arguably been Fox's downfall with these films.
Yeah.
We will get straight into then Deadpool 1. We'll do sort of like a mini sort of trilogy. Are they linked? Not really, but they do. Deadpool definitely keeps it. The link really is that Deadpool mentions Wolverine a lot in the first one, and then takes the piss out of and spoils the ending of Logan if you've not seen Logan in the opening like 2 minutes of Deadpool 2. So it is kind of the loosest trilogy, and Deadpool would make a very crude joke about looseness there. So what are we've briefly touched on it before, your thoughts on the Fox X-Men Marvel oeuvre?
Oeuvre, that's a different word for the vocabulary for the vocal cords. Oeuvre. Anything post Days of Future Past? No. Apocalypse wasn't that bad. No. Anything post Apocalypse is arguably pointless, except for the movie that we're going to talk about. Because I mean, Deadpool was around the time of Apocalypse, both 2016 Logan being the year after, and Deadpool 2 being 2018. And I'm not saying New Mutants is a waste of time or anything, but it's just a waste in the sense of nothing was going to come out of it. But we already knew, considering the situation behind the scenes for that movie anyway, and the whole Disney buyout. So we, regardless of your thoughts and stance of the New Mutants movie and characters as a whole, I'm just calling it a waste in this instance because we ain't ever going to get any of those ever again, unless Mr. Reynolds has the magnetic power, certain Magneto effects, and somehow brings the most wildest New Mutant people that we didn't expect to be in Deadpool 3. But it's good that we talk about the X-Men as a whole oeuvre because we know from one of the trailers that we're getting a whole bunch of the OG X-Men villains, like the original Sabretooth. Toad seems to be in it. Azazel from First Class is a shot from the trailer. We're not breaking something unearthed, newly discovered footage. It's just,
it's like a wide shot of like a group of them, isn't it? There's like about 5 or 6
the
of
Brotherhood
them.
of Mutants, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants from X-Men '98, at least. So it's a good thing that we're getting at least those sort of throwbacks. But can we see old X-Men or even X-Men yet to be done on film? Without asking for too much, Ryan.
X-Men
No pressure. But yeah,
possibly. If you had to pick a favorite X-Men film, what would you pick?
It's in the title. It's First Class. It's first place. It's First Class. I think, as a movie, let alone a comic book movie, it's a really cool action. It isn't a kind of a throwback to the old spy movies of old, but with comic book people, which sounds ridiculous on paper, but it just flows like a James Bond inspired movie. And that, again, you'd think shouldn't really work the way it does, but with someone like Matthew Vaughn behind the camera and on the script kind of the part, it's just a way that the movie than anyone was expecting it to be. And on rewatches, it's one that I tend to find more new details about. But if you're not talking about First Class, then X2 and Days of Future Past. But although Days of Future Past is less of a departure from the comic that it's based on, but yeah, both of them are phenomenal as well.
Yeah, I'd say First Class is one of my favorites. Like, I do like X-Men and X-Men 2. I think are still very good movies. Obviously, aged a lot more. Circumstance of actions of certain directors and things of it's an argument that's as old as time in terms of like when a shitty person is found out to be shitty, do you then hate all the stuff they've done? It's very much on your preference and how you can, if you can, detract art from artists, see people still listen to Michael Jackson and things like that. And with all the horrible things that Bryan Singer has done is deplorable, and I don't want him anywhere near an X-Men film or film in general. But I still I really do I do have a lot of fun still with those first two because it's very of that generation of early 2000s and look, this is us. We're straying into fucking comics. We're never gonna give them the right costumes because we're fucking scared of that for some reason. What would you prefer? A yellow spandex? Yes, obviously I would. The casting and the writing for some of them is just Cyclops is meant to be like the X-Men's Captain America. He is the good guy, he is the moral compass, and he's just written like a bit of a bitch sometimes, which is a shame for Scott Marsden and Ty Sheridan. I think Scott fucking James Marsden is the much better version of Cyclops. I would say that. I think we have some great moments like the whole stuff with bloody Nightcrawler in that opening for X2. I think is fabulous. I think what you feel about Apocalypse, I feel about X3. I think X-Men 3 isn't that bad compared to the rest of that trilogy. It does stick out like a sore thumb.
While we're on X-Men 3, not to interrupt, X-Men 3 or Spider-Man 3, because they're both around the same time. Obviously 1 year after, but they're kind of Spider-Man 3 isn't a bad Spider-Man movie. It's the weakest of the bunch, or the weakest of the Tobey trilogy. No. I wouldn't view Spider-Man 3 as a bad movie, like you're saying about The Last Stand. But is it kind of the same thing? How you would view Spider-Man 3, or is one clearly better than the other?
Similar, yeah. I'd say probably out of the two, I would rather watch Spider-Man 3 because I think having Sam Raimi through that trilogy is just you're at least getting the visual consistency there. It's the fact that there's just so much studio interference that like you got to put Venom in the movie. I want Venom. Venom sells toys, even though Venom didn't sell toys since the 90s. But whereas it's we have Brett Ratner doing X3, it's like this flavor's different, but he's straight. It's a bit like I'd say how they would do because X-Men really fundamentally should be, and I hate to generate some traffic towards another troublesome woman in her franchise, but it should be like Mutant Harry Potter. That's what it should be like. It's a big school. There's a fucking wise old headmaster. There's a really old evil guy that has his own like dark fucking mutants and things like that. It should be more like that. But and that's the kind of stuff it loses. Like the school is kind of second fiddle, and it is just like it's because it became clear that Hugh Jackman's a star. We'll push him on and stuff like that. And you get to X-Men Origins Wolverine. Like had they not rushed it, had there been more care put into it, I think could have been a much better movie. The stuff they were going to do for X-Men Origins Magneto is worked wonderfully into First Class. I would watch a whole movie of Magneto Nazi Hunter. I really would. Because that whole stuff, and I think they've always been good at casting. Like you look at both generations, and there's like, no, I think they're really good. Probably the weakest pick maybe is Nicholas Hoult as First Class Beast, because Kelsey Grammer is just like you learn to appreciate that as well. That Kelsey Grammer is just fucking that is Beast. That is cartoon 90s Beast put to live film. Which is a shame, and we'll get maybe some answers to where the fuck that's going with the Marvels and Secret Wars and all that shit one day. But for its own universe, it was one of them things. It was like I think it was. I don't know if you were the same, but like I'd watched it as a kid, and then because of just completionism and the fact that the MCU was going on, I was like, well, they're bringing out a new X-Men film, so I'll try it. Maybe there'll be a good. It's probably 50-50 on good ones and bad ones. There's. I think the only one that's outright shit for me is like Apocalypse because it's just falling off the bat. Fucking Singer's like busy committing heinous crimes and not turning up to set most of the time. So then Kimbo, actually no, Dark Phoenix is it's drivel. It's fucking the series goes out with a fucking whimper, and it's like it's always a speech, Charles, and nobody cares. It's like it's taking the piss out of itself at that point. I do love First Class. I loved Days of Future Past more at the time. I think the more you rewatch it, the movie just it's like a cheap shirt. It falls apart more and more. The more you pull on a thread, the bigger the holes get, and it's a shame. But again, it's like, we're gonna send Wolverine back in time. Why? Because Hugh Jackman's the star. We haven't had a film with Hugh Jackman starring in it for a while.
He's branding, damn it. Yeah.
I like the Wolverine. I think the Wolverine, in some ways, like filmmaking wise, not in terms of story. I think in filmmaking wise, I prefer a lot of that to Logan. But I think Logan's story is like Logan is such a bare bones, right? It's nothing like Old Man Logan, because we'll get to that. But like it's such a bare bones thing of it. It's a simple thing. Get this kid to the border. And that's what it is. It strips it back to Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, the first, feature film performance from Daphne Keane, who has gone on to be an absolute amazing, amazing actor. And I hope that one day we maybe get a Secret Wars cameo, or like you get to come back and do the Laura film that they wanted to do, and that we have more X-23. Because I think to be like, what was she like, 12, 13 when they filmed that, and it's just like it's outstanding. What a young fucking amazing person. But Deadpool is something that's obviously been floated around for a while because, he's X-rated. He breaks the fourth wall. They promised, if Ryan Reynolds was in Blade Trinity, that they would let him do Deadpool. And we got a very shit version of Deadpool in X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yeah, I mean, what a weird. Like you told me something new. I didn't know if he was in Trinity, then that was kind of the deal. They let him then do, well, not the poor version, but obviously it was like, yeah, we'll give you Deadpool back in 2008. I didn't know, or 2007 whenever they would have filmed Origins. I didn't know that was he was then. I'm in Trinity and we'll do Deadpool, like you say.
By most accounts, it was like a carrot on the stick from the studio because they knew that that's what he wanted to play. So
Yeah.
that they, you know, it'd be in Blade, yeah, we'll get you a Deadpool movie, and it was always kind of pushed to the side. Can we do an R-rated superhero movie? And these three that we're going to talk about are R-rated, and you know they are, I think, all the better for it because it lends to certain aspects of the characters better, and it's all thanks to someone. We don't know who. Maybe it was Tim Miller. Maybe it was Ryan Reynolds. Maybe it was one of the writers leaking the test footage that a version of that makes it into the genuine Deadpool film. And we got that, thankfully, because then the studio were like, oh, there is an appetite for it. And it was one of the highest rated R-rated movies of all time. So, cast your mind back, if you can, Connor. Get Kitty Pryde to send your mind back to 2016. How were you excited for a Deadpool movie? Were you indifferent? Were you just excited to sort of see what they were going to do with it?
It was I'm not comparing it to the No Way Home effect, but even before I put two and two together and Deadpool was part of the X-Men Fox stuff, my real prior knowledge before the film was an appearance in Marvel Ultimate Alliance, where he's an unlockable character, and obviously it wasn't Ryan Reynolds voicing that character, but he essentially is a dickhead that, like you say, makes fun of the gamer playing the game. He tells you to go outside and get a life, and he looked like a knockoff Spider-Man. That's kind of my prior interpretation of what I knew of Deadpool then. So I put the two together from the game, and I kind of thought, oh, like geeky childhood nostalgia. Let's see if it's anything like what I knew. And in the best way, if this is other instances, it might be the worst way possible, but it's absolutely nothing like the game. It isn't because the game was aimed for kids and it was toned down or anything. Like, he was still quite vulgar language and very like expletive, whereas everyone in the game is more morally correct and, you know, less slang and speaking proper English, whereas Deadpool just says his shit in a game that was maybe a 12 at best. But regardless, 2016, Ryan Reynolds, who had been in stuff at the time, he'd been in things like I guess notoriously Green Lantern, which even rewatching recently, I didn't think it was awful. It is a bit of a whatever movie, but it's one that I kind of would look and go, it's that guy from Green Lantern. And obviously, he don't want to be associated with Green Lantern. DC didn't want to be associated with Green Lantern. Any Marvel movie at that time was better than Green Lantern. So the pressure was on for him to get it right. It's, hit or sink, go big or go home. And, luckily, safe to say, without spoiling the review or retrospect, it fucking banged, because this movie, like you said earlier, there's not a single person I know that hasn't at least watched it, doesn't like the movie, or doesn't at least appreciate or doesn't put Ryan Reynolds with Deadpool. Like, Ryan Reynolds is and lives and breathes the character. And, it's a movie, like, it's one of the ultimate comfort movies, whatever time you're feeling. Like, if I was to just watch the beginning scene, it's mega. It's mega. It's one of the comfiest movies to put on, even if you don't watch the whole thing. For me, anyway.
And how many times did you see it in the cinema?
I think only twice.
Back in your early days of filmdom.
I was not limited, non-unlimited back then. So
yeah,
that was a bit more.
Because I think I got unlimited because I'd seen Infinity War like 3 times. So I was like, I need to fucking sort my stuff out. So Deadpool 2 was one of the first, one of the earliest films that I got to see with my unlimited and things like that. But I saw Deadpool once in the cinema. It was packed out. It was full of all the people that love Deadpool, that love, like you say, love the game, because he was much more popular in the games, because he was kind of an elusive, like, oh, he's like a fan favorite character. It's a bit sort of like, obviously less mainstream, but like, sorry, he's probably more mainstream than like Moon Knight, for example. But like Moon Knight's sort of that level. Like, he's a character that everyone's sort of interested in, would like to see him done, and sort of thought wouldn't happen. And then you had Deadpool happen, and then it's kind of like, oh no, they're like, they'll fucking do anyone, you know what I mean? But Deadpool, I think, done a lot of good for the world of cinema and comic book movies, and did some bad as well, because it would depend on the long lasting effect of what they do next with Harley Quinn, things like that, how this third movie comes about, and I don't know, it integrates itself or doesn't. My favorite thing about the Deadpool films is they are of their own beast. It's, to pardon the pun, hey, no blue fur here, but it's in the universe, but it's so sort of like to the side of it that nothing, like, it doesn't matter that you like, oh, like they take the piss constantly. It's almost like the studio can afford another X-Man. Like, they could studio throw us a bone. What about the guy with the fucking blue fur and things like that? Like, it's all the jokes. Like, even like not having the cameos, I don't think it would make the film any worse. Like, you have the little points where they'd pop up here and there, like, McAvoy or Stewart. These timelines are so confusing. It's so meta, and you don't honestly need any of them. It gives us, ironically, the best version we've had of Colossus. Negasonic Teenage Warhead, I think, is such a well utilized character, even though her power set is now completely different to what it would have been in the comics. But that's how they negotiated to get Ego in Guardians of the Galaxy, by swapping property elements, because that's how contracts work in business, folks. I like how small it is. I think the first one is better made. Like, I think there's more love, more heart in the first one. And the second one that we'll get on to more is sort of like, well, the first one made money, so let's just do that again and do some similar sort of things. And it's like, yeah, okay, but I like the simpleness of the story. It's just he goes away because Wade Wilson gets the cancer's only in my liver, lungs, prostate, and brain. All things I can live without. And he, in terms of going to find a cure or stopping his girlfriend from seeing him suffer to sort of save her, he then ends up with Ed Skeen's brilliant fucking Ajax / Francis, and we're gonna fucking we're gonna stick a dog collar on you and sell you to the highest bidder, and we're gonna make you a super slave. And like, his mutation comes about, and now he's immortal and he's not dying from cancer, but he's ugly as balls. You know what I mean? He looked like an avocado had sex with a much older avocado. TJ Miller being in it is now problematic as well, but we can't fucking win everything, can we? I like that it sort of streamlines it. It takes all a lot of the elements that work about Deadpool and just it gives it one through line of like, this is why he's like this is how he gets to this is Ryan Reynolds becoming the best version of Deadpool. And I think yeah, I would say that on the whole, like, I like them both, but I'd say I prefer this one. I'd say this one's a strong, like, 9 out of 10. It's most of it takes place on a bridge, and like the flashbacks and stuff work in terms of the narrative structure. I like that a lot of that is to do with the financial constraints they had of the film, like in terms of how much budget they had. So smaller action sequences, so that's like written into the story why he's forgotten his gun bag and things like that. And even the final climax on the not Hydra helicarrier thing in the background, all things like that. It's very simple, very effective. It's Tim Miller's first feature film, direction.
It was. Yeah,
because he did go on to do Terminator, Dark Fate. Obviously, more predominantly known for his work as like video game, like cutscenes and direction and things like that. But it works because he's such a video game like character that I think Tim Miller kind of just sort of took the things of like, this is what we need to make the narrative work, and these are the action beats that would work in the same, because it kind of also feels a bit like a Deadpool game. Like, having played the Deadpool game, it's not too far off some of the elements in it. I know there's no big floating fucking skull acid fortress in the sky, but it does all the good things. And I think Rhett Reese and is it Brian Wernick and those that helped write it, like between those two, Ryan Reynolds and Tim Miller, I think it's such a close knit group. And I think maybe losing Tim for the sequel, you lose. I think maybe a bit of that voice doesn't translate over to the sequel as much as I think the sequel's as entertaining.
Yeah, okay. David Leitch did number 2, and then what's his name? Tim Miller, and Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick. You were right, we're all 3.
Okay, look at me knowing stuff. Your thoughts on the film, because you're a Deadpool kind of guy.
I'm a Deadpooler. I'm a Deadpool kind of guy. I like my Jimmy Chongas. Again, because of this movie, purely because of Deadpool 1, it's it's just a brilliant. It really did expand the character. It got beyond the pages of comic book geekdom and just it became more mainstream than. He's up there with your lens of your Spider-Man, your X-Men, your you know Captain America's, your Iron Man's. He's as cool. He is as well known as the rest of them. And considering that back in 2005 and six, when like Marvel Ultimate Alliance came out, he was just a comic book guy. Like if you knew, you knew kind of thing. It was a bright wink to the audience and to the players at the time. But you know, he's more mainstream, or he's just as mainstream as the biggest comic book characters today because of this movie. Um, and it's just you know, to its biggest strength and also detriment in terms of Reynolds, he will forever be known greatly as Deadpool. God forbid, you know, way ahead in the future when we're all old people, and you know, something happens, and you know, some executive goes, "We need Deadpool," but for X, Y, Z reason, it can't be Ryan. Say Ryan ain't no longer around. God forbid, don't happen. How would the next Deadpool be? Should we ever get to that point, or do you feel like if Ryan goes, Deadpool will then, in terms of portrayals, will go? People can still voice and perhaps do animated. In terms of live action, do you think we could ever get, like,
I
not
think
saying anytime
he's
soon
so
at all?
synonymous with the role, isn't he? It's Robert Downey Jr. and
Yeah,
Iron Man. And it is the two are intertwined. Like as much as I would, love to see it, the character carry on as long as it's done right. I think it's very much in terms of once he's not available or around anymore, like you say, then it's kind of, I don't think they can do. It's the same with why I think now, especially considering they're bringing back Hugh Jackman, I think all it does is make it harder to recast Wolverine because you're going to be like,
yeah,
we'll just get him to do it, but obviously you can't have him do it forever, which is one of the horrible things. But it's the same with RDJ. They're so synonymous with the role, and I also it would feel a bit wrong if we had like in like 10, 15 years them going like, oh, we got Deadpool and he played by Chris Pratt or something like that. It'd be like
yeah.
it
Three
doesn't.
Deadpools in 10 years' time. It wouldn't
Yeah,
be right.
it's not like. I mean, it shouldn't. It shouldn't be like that because the characters change and die and come back, and they're written differently, and they're always different. Like it should be more like Batman and Superman that you can have 5, 6, 7 people play it and not feel like you're attached to one of them, no matter how good they are. Because as Seth Rogen, one of Seth Rogen's jokes in I think it's Bad Neighbors or something when he was talking to Zac Efron, it's like it's such a generational thing because you'd ask someone like who's your Batman, and it's like Keaton, but then you got kids and it's like no, it's Bale, but it's like they're all good in their own way kind of thing. Whereas with a character
Yeah,
like Deadpool, I don't think you're going to have 4, 5, 6 versions of this because I don't know how much.
I don't
So I mean, we're
disagree.
already 6 years between the last film, so it's like it's not like they're pushing them out every couple of years or rebooting it or whatever. It's not like the days gone by, the early 2000s, where it's like we're going to do another Deadpool movie or we're going to do another Spider-Man movie. Like we've already had 3 Spider-Man, and that's a lot. But they're
That's a
also
lot.
that's
In 20
that's gone the
years,
way of
that's a lot.
Superman, hasn't it? In terms of now your appreciation
Mm,
for, oh well, we love we all love them for their different reasons and ways, like
yeah,
sort of thing.
and
I don't know.
likenesses and slight portrayals. But like you say, you can't do Deadpool any differently. If
Mm,
God forbid someone like Zack Snyder was going to do like a darker, edgier Deadpool, but you can't. You would just use the likeness and call it something else. Like that isn't Deadpool at all. The magic would go, and it'd just be a inspired knockoff. So it's one of those where if you were to do it again without copy and pasting what Ryan's magic, you'd have to kind of emulate him, and therefore you would lose your own identity in your portrayal should you do it in the
yeah,
future because you're just doing the
yeah.
best hits again.
A
Yeah.
bit like the James
So
Bond argument, isn't it? You can't. It's got to be something of yourself and new stuff. It can't just
yeah.
be emulating what's come before. But much like many roles that are go on and on and a recast, like your James Bonds, your Doctor Who's. Yeah, if they, I think, and it's one of the things I think Indiana Jones could have escaped. Like, because if they'd have brought it
Mm,
back and just recast it and like done it, I think you could have got to the point where it would have been like that. But now that role is so tied to Harrison Ford that like when he's dead, there is
on
no
his
more
soul.
Indiana Jones, like kind of thing. You know what I mean? And
Gone.
I think
Yeah.
this can go this way because it's what he like. It's like what we've been saying. It's what he's going to be most known for. Um, I love the cast in this film. I love the pace. Like it's an hour, 48 minutes. Like it zips by. It doesn't waste, I think, a single second. It but it doesn't also like it's not like 100 miles an hour. Like it does slow down. There is, you know, the expansion on the story. There is like the great supporting cast. You've got like Dupender, Blind Owl, obviously, unfortunately, TJ Miller as Weasel.
Yeah.
So like it all works. I think Morena Baccarin is used the most and the best in this one. Because if there's one thing that I really dislike about the second one, it's the use of her character in that, and it seems like we're unfortunately not going to get as much Morena Baccarin as we would like in Deadpool and Wolverine. But that's something for us to talk about when we've both seen Deadpool and
Not
Wolverine.
enough X-rated this time. Not enough X-rated in Moriana this time. She weren't X-rated enough.
Happy International Women's even the the sex fucking montage, like it's a bit much, but I think it just skirts the line of like, no, this is what these characters are like, and you're just sort of doing like a montage of like, oh, this is why they're in a relationship. Like you've got to that point where they've gone through all that, and now they actually, you know, have fallen for each other and are a couple, and they do suit each other's, you know, craziness. But what if I had to give it? I'd say like it's a 9 out of 10. Like it's a really solid film. It's probably a high 9 for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think a 9. I think a 9.
Really solid. One of the best superhero movies. It's probably on them lists of like superhero movies that you'd have to watch. Like it's not up there with in terms of like, you know, Dark Knight is one of the best movies made, you know, ever and stuff like that. So it's like you're seeing them, but like Deadpool, no, you have to see for this like version of it. It's the comedy, it's the fourth wall breaking, it's the meta-ness and the ability to take the piss out of itself that I really hope that they are doubling down on for a lot of the stuff with Disney. Like I want a lot of Disney jokes. Like we've had the pegging joke in the trailer. Like, is that it? Like I hope there's some digs at Feige and things like that. Because the best part of She-Hulk were the self-deprecating stuff for Feige and the Marvel Studios like building, like HQ. Like a lot of the self-deprecating stuff for that is like, if you're able to take the piss out of yourself and have fun with it, then obviously, you know that people are going to think you're a good sport and come back and watch your stuff.
Yeah.
So
and
that would be...
again, you're not afraid to make yourself look like a twit. You know, you're not afraid to make a fool of yourself, and you're only doing it in good spirits. And like you say, it only boosts morale and egos, and it doesn't make you look like a big old cocky financial money grabbing bastards that some studios might be out there.
Yeah, very true. From one really good superhero movie to, I think it would definitely be top 3 superhero movies of all time.
Top three worst of all time. I can't stand Logan. No.
2017, like you say, like we've got 3, you know, 2016, 17, 18, we had 3 pretty solid entries, non-MCU related Marvel superhero stuff. And I think Logan hit such a good, like the fact that it was 7 years ago, I think just baffles me. Like it really does. I remember seeing it opening night in the cinema.
You went to like a late night for that one, did you?
Yeah. So like it was like one of the first screens. It was such a good experience. Tears, like it's amazing because going into it, it's like we're gonna get a third film in the Logan Wolverine you know, trilogy where they're going to close that out. And ironically, it's probably one of the better trilogies in the X-Men franchise because it does get better with each subsequent film. I've got a lot of things I like about the Wolverine. I got some things that I like about Origins, but it is so blatantly, let's just push this shit out and someone will see it because it's got the Marvel name on it. They'll watch it. But again, like with Deadpool, this is so detracted because it's set 2029. Which is like a couple of years after the post credits. Yeah, because it's set a couple of years after the post credits of Days of Future Past, where the timeline's fixed and stuff like that. Or in more recent years, it's been labeled as like an alternative like universe. So you can believe that happened and they went on to be happy and all that stuff. But there's a universe where this happened. Will this be picked up on? That's the my only criticism with Wolverine coming back is as long as it doesn't, you know, negate the ending of Logan, which I don't think it will. I think it's going to be sort of the Patrick Stewart osmosis shorthand in terms of we want Professor X in this in Doctor Strange. Well, the most, you know, the most easily recognizable for a general audience that's Professor X is putting Patrick Stewart in the film, but it's completely a different version to that film series.
That
The end, not the, we can't just talk about the ending, but like Logan itself, again, so isolated, so minuscule, small cast, like it's so beautifully crafted as well.
Would you say the smallest cast? It's definitely one of the smallest casts, if not the smallest.
If we name all the main people, so Hugh Jackman,
Stephen
Daphne,
Merchant, Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, Daphne Keane. Not to cut you off. They're like the main.
Boyd
I'm thinking
Holbrook,
of the gang. Boyd Holbrook, yeah, villain.
Richard E. Grant.
Yeah. And then you've got a bunch of extras and people as soldiers and
you've got the Will and the Munson family that they help out on the farm. It's basically just that. That's it. And Gabriella. So it's like less than 15 people, really.
Yeah.
And it's so well done. Like it's Old Man Logan. It was like we're gonna do Old Man Logan, but obviously you can't do it because you haven't got your rights to your Hulks, your Captain Americas. You can't do Old Blind Hawkeye and things like that. But I think in name only, it takes those elements and it makes a gruff, like old, hero, reluctant hero as always. Logan has always been, and him and Charles have to take a child to the border in North Dakota, to Eden, where the coordinates are, from a comic book. Because one of my favorite bits in the trailer, which I think is so underappreciated, is like maybe half this stuff happened, maybe it didn't, but not like this. Like obviously they became such folklore that they made the comics of these characters because people put so much love and time into. Don't know what fucking versions of like the public actually got attached to, because fucking hell, it weren't Ty Sheridan, Alexandra Shipp, and all that, was it? Like, oh, they're kind of like Avengers level status in the 90s now. Okay.
It was like Linda Carter. It was Linda Carter as like the Dark Phoenix. It might have been like Christopher Reeve as your taller Wolverine. It could have been Clint Eastwood as your Cyclops. Oh no, Clint Eastwood Wolverine, Christopher Reeve Cyclops. It could have been anybody. Proper taking the piss. No disrespect to anyone coming from those generations, but yeah, exactly what versions of the X-Men and were they in-universe comics tied on? We'll never ever sadly know, unless we do get a cool joke where it turns out Deadpool in this film is making his own comic series, and it's the Deadpool Wolverine like road trip or comic trip or something, and they take a mick out of that. But also that's a cool nod to Logan, should they choose to do that. But if I was in the seat, I would try and do a joke based on that comic joke in Logan, because it was a real personal highlight. But anyway, yeah, good question. What on earth would it be based on? We would never know. Never know.
I love this film so much. Like it's hard. Like it's a hard watch. Like when you think about it, like it's so sad and depressing because it is just like there's nothing left for it. Like they've killed off mutants because of what they've been doing to the food supply. So it's been suppressing the X gene. There's not been a natural like born mutant in the last like 15 years.
Yeah.
Like it's insane. Like they've gradually died them out so that they can then create their own mutants, the new mutants, in order to basically control them and use them as weapons. Because they even say like, because I was watching it earlier, like even when Richard E. Grant's like, we thought you could by putting the powers in the children that we could teach them to grow up without a conscience, but you can't nurture rage. You have to manufacture it. You have to start from scratch, and that's why the villain of the piece is not just the corporation of and what the fuck's that organization called? I don't even remember. But whoever Richard E. Grant's in charge of. But then you have to have the younger, fitter, stronger X-24 Wolverine clone. Like that's where it goes to. But you get the family aspects before you go to that thing where it's like, oh, now we need something for him to fight, something with actual stakes, because he's getting blood poisoning from the adamantium because it's been in his body since 1970 or 8 or whatever it was, whenever Origins was meant to have happened. It was in the 70s at some point, maybe the 80s, and since then it's like, oh no, because having that much metal would cause you to have blood poison. Like I know a guy that who had a metal hip replacement, and that was slowly giving him like blood poisoning, so they had to replace it with a different material one, like things like that. So obviously having metal all over your fucking skeleton, it's going to cause some problems, and eventually it makes him the thing that made him indestructible is killing him.
The thing that kills him, which is it's kind of like a poem. It's ironic, dark poetry.
It's
The man that was
poetry rhymes. Jar Jar's the key of all this.
Mentions the key.
What are your thoughts on Logan?
Again, something that I hadn't rewatched really since. I feel like I've rewatched the movie once since the cinema. I only saw Logan the one time at cinema, and that stayed with me for a while. And even so, to the point where you can't really see, but in that cupboard is kind of like my film collection, and basically the first two purchases that I chose to go out of my way and buy were, ironically, Logan and Deadpool 2 with you. So I hadn't then watched Logan for a long while after that, and I think it was maybe early COVID. I just whacked it on and got even sadder, so I then turned it off. So this rewatch was probably the first time properly since the cinema that I'd seen Logan. All for this Wolverine, Deadpool, of course, but it was different to how I personally remember it, and I think memory does have an effect on rewatches, initial scores, and when you go back to revisit something, does it not? It did not hold up. But when I actually got to the beginning of the meet and the setup, I remember the main course. I remember how it ends. I remember you can't forget the third act, but I remember how it got there, but I couldn't remember the journey. I remember the destination, but I couldn't remember the journey. So it was really cool to just rediscover it in a way. Well, for me this time, it was a good rediscovery. I had read Old Man Logan literally within the last month, and I've watched the film within the last couple of weeks. So the comparisons and similarities to Old Man Logan were there. The fact that it isn't just, obviously for a variety of reasons, they can't just do that comic book in how long is this one? Is it 2.5 hours?
Yeah, 17 minutes for Logan. I just looked it up.
For 2017, they can't do. Again, they can't. Nothing can do that comic justice. But nothing going forward should do this film with the surface either. This is definitely its own. Again, probably out of the three, its own unique blend and own identity. And I don't think nothing should even come close to this. This is James Mangold's vision. All right, he wasn't there for X-Men Origins, but through Wolverine into this one, they're both different movies, but I still see the through line between those two by Mangold, and this is just his take into his interpretation. And no one should dare do this again, because it won't be as good. Not to spoil it in the future, but it won't be as good or as iconic. And the fact that it was quote unquote the last Hugh Jackman performance for the last 7 years, it rings deep. But then Deadpool Wolverine, you can't undo this movie. You can't undo it.
Don't undo the death. No.
No.
No, but like you said, it's cool that you kind of got to like rediscover it, as you said just there, because it's like, I do like that with films that you won't always stay completely fluid with a lot of your opinions, like stuff like this. Like you can probably listen to some of our stuff from when things come out, and if you hear us talk about it now, it's probably slightly different opinions on those kind of things, like because with like you say, your like the way you remember stuff, your age and your sort of experience, and like I think your appetite and taste as a fan of film, like we've both, like over the last like 6 years of doing this, like a lot of our opinions and tastes in films have developed and changed, and there's certain things that we'll sort of look for. There's some things that maybe you'll assume will be in something, so you can almost kind of prejudge it of something even though you've not seen the film, so you might have like these like precognitive thoughts on things. So it's like there's a lot to sort of digest, but I think it's always nice to come back to a film like Logan and then watch it and remember why you enjoyed it so much. Like obviously, like it's not a happy film, but like why you enjoyed watching it and how much of a good film and well made it is. Like it's nice to sort of always come back to a film that's like, oh no, this is why it's amazing, because it's well made, it's well written, the cast, like you say, like it's small but they're all impactful, they all do their job, and I think that if you are a fan of comics, if you are a fan of superheroes, like Logan should be a film that you definitely watch at some point in your life. I think it's up there with, you know, the impact of Christopher Reeve's Superman. You've got, you know, your Spider-Man trilogy, like you've got the Dark Knight. I think this is as impactful. If you had a Mount Rushmore of Marvel films, I think it would be
Mm,
the
yeah.
fourth place. If not, it would be very close because I think, especially what it's done for what a comic book movie can be seen as. It's not just like it's the superheroes, the spandex, the big beam in the sky, the big like team thing. There are stories to tell within that world that aren't just, you know, you shooty bang bang kind of things. But no, I just have a deep love and appreciation for this, for it being the original, like you say, the original send off for Hugh Jackman. You can still
Mm,
get emotionally stirred by the ending, even though you know that he's coming back in some capacity. Hopefully, not necessarily the exact same one, but his
no.
journey as well. From I think it means more for us because, you know, 17 years before that, we'd seen, you know, where the Wolverine character had started, and we'd been on this whole journey. Yes, the continuity was fucked, but you'd gone through this whole
All
thing with
over the
him.
place.
For him to start as
Mm,
this loner that didn't want to be part of a team, to then, you know, he basically dies protecting his daughter. Like it's such a trajectory for nearly 20 years of us just as fans growing up as kids watching this kind of thing. You know what I mean?
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. And to think that again, back in X Men, I always want to say it's 1998, but that's fucking Blade. X Men from 2000. No one would have even thought that idea possible because one, the Old Man Logan comic weren't even a thing back in 2000. But again, that end goal with the funeral, with his death and sacrifice. But I think the thing that gets me as well, as much as we're loving and praising the film, I'd love the cross that turns into the X. Like that was the part that got me. Used the X, and I was like, bloody hell.
Yeah, simple but so effective. And the speech that she
And
gives is
again,
from
not
the
done
film that
very
she's
well.
watching earlier.
Yeah, yeah, all that stuff was great. That stuff was cool.
Like that
But
core
yeah,
three
back
are
in
amazing. Sorry, in terms of like Patrick, Hugh, and Daphne, I think are all just on song. Like I love the familiarity of Charles and Logan and stuff like that. Like
yeah,
it just plays
because
so well into each
also,
other.
it's also so unlike Patrick Stewart and so unlike Professor X. I say Patrick Stewart across the whole because what other Patrick Stewart film do we know of that he's literally given up on life, he's given up on all hope. I've never seen such a depressing Patrick Stewart performance, like ever. It's so unlike Professor X and just in general. But that was brilliant again to rediscover to the extent I remember where that character ended up. But again, just the Wolverine is I guess the moral compass and like I guess the guy, the carer in this sense. Whereas like he was always Professor X was the one sort of taking Wolverine in and trying to encourage him and make Wolverine sort of feel accepted. Whereas at this point it was the other way around. But also Old Man Logan, Hugh Jackman, Logan, whatever you want to call him in this movie, he is at that point where he just wants to stack it off and fuck everything up, like because it is that dark world that the film's set in. But I completely kind of forgot the extent of how dark and depressing and bleak Patrick Stewart was. So that was a dark highlight for me.
Yeah. And I'm fucking 90. Like
I'm
it
fucking amazing.
because of, like you say, how like good their relationship has been. Like it's, you know, mentor and
Mm.
student, and like he's looking after him now.
Yeah,
They know they've been through so much, and all they have left is each other. That they are basically family by the end of it. And I think his death is really tragic because at the time as well, this was the end of Patrick Stewart ever coming back as Professor X. But like we say, the visual shorthand of we need to cast Professor X in the multiverse film. You cast Patrick. As much as I love James McAvoy, Patrick Stewart is the definitive Professor X. Like he is. If you think of Professor X, it's him. Like
oh, it's always
again,
Patrick Stewart. Always
another
Patrick
role
Stewart.
that's going to be very hard to recast
Yeah.
when they eventually get round to doing it. But like that was so tragic because it's him finally remembering like what he's done. Because in the comic, it was Wolverine that kills the mutants that leads to that because Mysterio
Yeah.
basically disguised himself, but it was the students he was killing that he made think were his minions or whatever, and he kills off all of them, and then it's like, oh fuck, like what have I done? Whereas the fact that he keeps blaming Logan at the beginning, like what did you do? What did you do? But he's keeping it from Charles that it was Charles that fucking did it with one of his brain seizures, because a brain that powerful, sorry, in like a really omnipotent like mutant that telekinesis and mind control, to then get something like Alzheimer's, it is like a nuclear weapon. He is like a fucking ticking time bomb, and those seizures and like those things that happen throughout the film, that's tense shit. Like that one in the hotel room where Wolverine's got to claw his way back and somehow move through it when he's seizuring out and freezing everyone to a point where they can't even breathe, and then he's having to fight off the SWAT team while doing it, and like stabbing the guys through the head and things like that. It's like, I mean, the action's cool, but also it's like, this is fucking bleak. Like, this is terrible. Like, this is a character that we know and love aging to the point where they can't control themselves.
Should not be rooting for this. Yeah, we should not be rooting for this. But yeah, it is. It's just unlike anything we'll probably ever get, in all seriousness. So yeah, it's something like a Deadpool can come along and make fun, perhaps do a cool scene that homages what we felt back in 2017. But for another big time director, indie studio to even attempt what this movie did, I don't. Leave this alone, please. Leave this on its pedestal of badass comic bookness, and don't even dare become this great. It's just Logan's unique. Leave it on its pedestal. If Mount Rushmore, if we were to do 4 comic book movies that aren't MCU related, we can count all generations of DC. Are we then mine? Spider-Man 2, Logan, not in any order, but Logan, Spider-Man 2, say The Dark Knight, and I'm thinking the 4th movie on the spot.
I think it's Christopher Reeve Superman. It's got to be up there with that. Like in terms of impactfulness, it's like those kind of things. Like they all did different things. They all brought superheroes onto the next step. Like You'll Believe a Man Can Fly. You did. Spider-Man 2 was like a really well-made sequel. Like and brought more public attention to superhero movies when we were only getting 1 or 2 of them every like 3 or 4 years, kind of thing. And then you look at And then you look at The Dark Knight, competing with the MCU on a level and being one of the best made film. Like not just the Batman is a better Batman film, but like The Dark Knight is such a well-made piece of cinema that you can't help but appreciate it. And yes, it did feed the ego of me, Chris Nolan, but like without that, you don't get more of a push for the more cinematic approach for some of the MCU stuff. You don't push more to the director's strengths, like your Taika Waititi's, if we'd have got it, Edgar Wright, because that would have been amazing. Your James Gunn's and so ons. And then you look at Logan, and these can have heart and soul and be not just fun, zany, colorful things. It can be bleak, it can be depressing, but it can pull on your heartstrings and take a character that you've loved, that has been so much fun, and take him to the ragged edge.
You mentioned color. It was so colorful that they even had to release this movie in black and white for you to watch at home. I know you can do that on your TV anyway, but why suck up your TV? But the fact that this movie
in color, Connor, or did you do Logan Noir?
I've seen both in color. I've not seen Noir. But no, I think come closer to Deadpool and Wolverine, I'll probably watch it again after this and experience it in black and white.
It is a lot of fun in black and white. It really is.
Yeah. Cool. Really, I'm looking forward to it.
I would say it's also one of the few comic book films and films in general that is, I think, a solid 10 out of 10. I think you could there's some nitpicks in there, but I think in terms of everything it does so well, and for 2 hours 17 minutes isn't short. Like it's obviously like half an hour longer than Deadpool, but it doesn't feel it. Like everything at the cinema is, I think when I saw it, it was the perfect time and place to see it. It obviously resonated with me, loving that character, loving the portrayal, and that coming to an end and saying goodbye. And that was really sad. Like the death is poignant still, like because it stuff like that then becomes more of the nostalgia and like the loving and watching of that character. You can still feel all those things. And as long as the next film doesn't, actively try to shit on that, then I think it can still have an impact because, yeah. but hopefully. So should we move on to the last of our mini trilogy in Deadpool 2, which is I don't think I own Deadpool 2 because I know there's the weird super duper version that's wider, or there's the 2-pack, but I don't have like a standard Deadpool 2.
You can get a 2-pack, but no, as far as I'm aware, the super duper edition is the only not at least on 4K. It's the only sort of physical edition there is to get, unless maybe there's a steelbook where it's only the standard theatrical Deadpool 2. But essentially, I've only ever seen theatrical original Deadpool 2. I've seen comparison videos online with some of the jokes that are sort of inserted and swapped and switched in the super duper cut. So I can only talk about the cinema version, but I mean, maybe in the future we can do a cut versus cut comparison or whatever. Or again,
I'd love to do that.
you guys
like Star Wars would be a fucking breeding ground for that, wouldn't it? Fucking cut, original cut versus like old cut and special editions. So how did you watch Deadpool? Did you watch it on Disney Plus? Did you watch your own copy of it?
Oh, what? I mean, for this rewatch or back when? Oh no, for this, I had 4K. I had to watch it properly in highest definition format possible. 4K, Ultra HD, cheap phone. No, I had to watch it off of the release.
Yeah, and so going into this one, obviously, like I think the general public was more into the Deadpool character, and it brought him more into the mainstream. So obviously, then there was more just the general audience, which I think this angles slightly more at, which is loses some of the uniqueness of the first one, because the first one I think is just lightning in a bottle. How do you feel about Deadpool 2? Like, are you like for it, against it, indifferent? Are you just kind of happy to see the character again? Like,
I don't know. There's a character in me that wants to be the negative mini. I want to say this one's rubbish, but I can't say anything bad about any of these 3 movies. But no, I was for this. This was not the first movie again. This was different. It took in my mind, a really minor villain that I didn't get the appeal for, that was portrayed once awfully by Vinnie Jones in the form of the Juggernaut, and kind of made him cool, at least to me, and I guess the more general audience. But then having, years later, talking about like recently, having read a lot of the early Juggernaut appearances in the early comics, Juggernaut was a fucking badass of a character. So the fact that, in this rewatch and having the future knowledge sprung at me for this rewatch, seeing Juggernaut get this much exposure, it feels well earned. It feels right, and Juggernaut's fucking sick. I never cared about him before Deadpool 2, let alone the comics that I've taken so long to read. But no, Juggernaut, he's pretty surprisingly good, although still in style with the Deadpool humor.
No, definitely. Do you feel like it's different from the first one in terms of, obviously Tim Miller's now not there, so one of those creative voices isn't like as much a part of it? I believe Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick writing the third one, because it was going to be the 2 ladies from Bob's Burgers were doing it, and then I think they might have then just gone back to those guys when it came to writing Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm not sure, but I think you can definitely sense not having Tim Miller's voice, and sort of to kind of rein Ryan Reynolds in, for want of a better word, in terms of, like, obviously Ryan knows the character. Ryan is the character. Like, he's one of those people that he is like Deadpool, like Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark. Like, it is one of those kind of things. So like, I can get the the involvement and like what he's wants to do for the fans and for the people that love the character and things like that. But there is also an element of, the more voices that you have, like, new voices sometimes can obviously, like, can come up with things. You don't want to just do the same thing over and over again. That's the best thing about out some of our favorite films, is that they will go on, they will develop for sequels. They won't just try and do the same thing over and over again, kind of thing. So his voice, I think, is definitely felt in absence.
But then not to crap on David Leitch, who took over the place, because not to brief tangent on David Leitch, but I think he's one of the best action directors going. I've liked all of his stuff, and this is still included in that list. But yeah, the guy that, uncredited, worked on John Wick 1, co-directed John Wick 1. Again, this movie that no one would have seen at the time, but then kind of blew up overnight, like as a a bit of a weird sensation back in 2014, the year of great movies. He then did Atomic Blonde, which was another really solid action movie that, again, was one of my early 4Ks, and I only watched because of you, George. But I really did enjoy Atomic Blonde. That's due for a rewatch, in fairness. I haven't probably watched Atomic Blonde nearly as long as it took me to rewatch Logan, so in the future, probably talk about Atomic Blonde. But yeah, Deadpool 2 then came out. Of course, the pressure was on for this director who'd done a couple cool movies that we ended up seeing, but then was it going to capture the magic of Tim Miller's Deadpool and Ryan Reynolds, blah, blah, blah. I just want to say, this feels like it's trying to be an action movie on the par of John Wick, Atomic Blonde. This does feel more conventional, trying to be more of a blockbuster, trying to be more of your, I guess, superhero action movie, but also just using cool action stuff and not just using powers for the sake of powers. Because Deadpool's power is his mouth. If you didn't know,
it's the mouth with the mouth.
It is the merc with the mouth. But yeah, I'm not dissing David Leitch at all. He was a cool backup choice. If it wasn't for Mr. Leitch, then I wouldn't know back in 2018 who I would have then chosen to then do it or to rep the helms or carry the weight of it. But no, this movie's still solid for me. It didn't really affect me as much as perhaps I thought it was going to. But I think that's just down to Reynolds more than anything. If Reynolds purposely went less comedy and less fourth wall breaking, that's a sacrilege against the character, then it would have felt like a completely different movie, and I'd be more on the par of, oh yeah, this lost all its magic and this is just a shit sequel. But the fact that, I guess, in its action it feels more conventional is the part of, yeah, this isn't the same as the first. It doesn't have as much heart as the first. So at least that's how I perceive this one.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair enough. This one's 2 hours long, dead on. So about 15 minutes longer than Deadpool 1.
Oh yeah. So I still had Logan on my mind. Sorry, Q.
That's all right. And I think Deadpool and Wolverine is 2 hours 17 minutes or something like that. Let me just check. 2 hours 7. Sorry, I knew that I've not seen it. So longer again still. It does still fly by. I think the pacing's good. I think it's probably out of the three, the pacing isn't as good as I think the other two, because as long as Logan is, I think there's not a second wasted, and definitely for the first one, for the budget it's made from, I think they get the maximum amount out of all the money is on screen and not a second or a cent is wasted. For this one, it was like you say, it is more obviously for the general audience. You've got David Leitch, who's directed or co-directed one of the best action modern films of cinema, and has gone on, like you say, to do many good things, including most recently The Fall Guy, and will no doubt do many more action related films in the future. And all of that looks great. There is more of a general thing of like this is now like, we've got to make the money from the audience, we've got to do this, we're putting more money into it on screen because it looks more expensive. I hate that Vanessa is killed off. I really do. Like, she is, she's the motivation by dying, and then you bring her back at the end anyway. So it's kind of, what was the point? But then you didn't want to kidnap her again and have her be the motivation just to keep getting rescued and have her be the fucking Mary Jane Watson of this thing when she doesn't deserve to be.
Just to have Ryan Reynolds take the piss out and be like, why does this feel so familiar? I swear she was only nits like down the road from this. See that boat over there? That's where I shot a movie with a friend called Ryan, and a guy that rhymes with, he weren't in it, but yeah.
Mate, it's just such a waste of Morena Baccarin and things like that. Jim Miller is thankfully in it slightly less, I think, or about the same, but like he's not as noticeable in as much of the film, because it was at this point then you're like, oh, like he's actually being a bit of a prick. Fire Fist, the kid that plays him, fucking Aussie actor or New Zealand actor. He's very good. He did Hunt for the Wilder People, wasn't he?
Yes, Hunt for the viral New Zealand work. Julian Dennison.
Julian Dennison, yes.
On a with Beatty fame at that time.
Very good.
Yeah.
And like
Yes.
he does make a good point, doesn't he? When's the last time you saw a plus size superhero? The industry discriminates. Like so good. Like and as jokey is like, you know, play up the jokes more for the audience, but the whole stuff in the prison, I think like it does still crack me up. Like, you know, the last thing we need is more hepatitis. Oh, it's slippery. This table needs a wipe down. And all the stuff with like, because I think Josh Brolin is good. Like he is a very good pick for Cable.
He's a cool Cable. Cable's a character I've not gotten up to in the comics. I can't compare, or I can't particularly praise him as like the definitive Cable portrayal. He hasn't had other portrayals like in live action. This is kind of like the only proper live action Cable we've had.
And as far as we know, not in the new one.
No, unless that's a troll. No, one can hope. One can hope.
That's the only real shame is that it does the whole thing to set up the X-Force film that they were going to do, that then obviously gets scrapped. The Disney merger happens, and then you're going to lose a lot of these characters and motivations for the third one because, by the sounds of it, Vanessa is no longer with Wade. You've got obviously there's no Cable. You do have Negasonic and Yukio and all the rest, but like Cable's not there, and I think that's. He said he was going to stick around. Maybe he's gone back. Some mention of him would be nice. Like I don't expect to like hear what happened to Cable since, but like you know he's out there somewhere.
Maybe,
and if when he does come back,
could be the post credit. Maybe that could be the post credits gag. It could be a what happened to Cable.
maybe he's stuck in a line at like Starbucks or something. Because the whole like post credit scene of him going back and using Cable's machine to go back and save Vanessa and make loads of changes and clean up the timeline, like when he kills off shit Deadpool from Origins, when he shoots himself in the head, when he gets the Green Lantern, like it's funny, it's self-deprecating, which I think Ryan Reynolds is really good at. Like he is really good at taking the piss out of himself, and is always up for doing that. And
love that.
I just, you know, also I love as well, the use of the X-Force. Like you've got fucking Terry Crews, like Brad Pitt for just a brief cameo. You got the character of Shatterstar just in it for 5. Well, Shatterstar's dead, but he was a bit of a prick. Like,
but
everyone said there was a high win. Bloody what's her name? Domino. Like honestly.
Domino. What is her name? Internet. Zazie Beetz.
Zazie Beetz. The fabulous Zazie Beetz. Like her and Josh Brolin. And when those characters come back, I would like them to still play them because, like,
cool. That threesome, that trilogy of characters. Yeah, those portrayals. We need them. Their banter was wonderful and probably the best thing about this particular movie. But even then, I'd like to see Julian Dennison come back as well. I'd like to really see
Julian Dennison. Yeah, I think also the guy that they got to play Julian Dennison, like the future version of Fire Fist, also worked as a good adult cast for Julian Dennison as well. Like, that was really good. The whole thing being that they're trying to make Deadpool an X-Man, and you know he goes off, he kills, like, you know, he was abused, you can fucking see it, kind of shit. And all that stuff, like that's, you know, it's all like in good intentions in terms of he's trying to stop this kid that's been abused, and then goes on a journey. Like the whole thing is because they wanted a kid, so he is like the surrogate kid of Deadpool, that he's got to save him in order to save the future, so that, you know, Cable doesn't have to come back and kill him, kind of thing. And that all resolves itself, I think, pretty nicely. I like that there's no major let's stop and make the Thanos joke, like it happens and then they move on because of obviously him portraying Thanos at the time, Josh Brolin. Big CGI fight coming up, like stuff like that, like even that self-deprecating.
This shit starts in the DC universe.
I'm Batman 2. Is dubstep still a thing? Like some of those jokes have aged like quite poorly, but like it can still give us a giggle. Like it's still a lot of fun to be had with this film. It's a similar level of humor that I'd like to see in the next one. I wouldn't want them to keep pushing it more into the mainstream and joke after this, joke after this, joke about this. Like there's still some heart to the story, and I hope that Wolverine is obviously going to be the straight man in the relationship between the two of them. So we'll see. Hopefully, like they can counteract and it not feel like it's over the top and just for memes and jokes and clips on TikTok.
Well, I feel like without again, we're not trying to slate and praise every director, but I feel like with Sean Levy, however you pronounce his surname, he, out of the three names, has the potential to go into that mainstream appeal, TikTok appeal, whatever the cool kids are going to do, we're going to set the next trend. And he could perhaps have the least voice, the least impact, and really make it another superhero movie, which is the last thing we want for these three solid movies, because we just keep praising them for the voices they've had. We don't want this build up to go generic in a month's time, you know? So, Sean, don't fail us, please.
Well, not long till we find out. I think this is still solid. I'd say I'd give it an 8. Like it's probably a high 8. It's just it's a bit longer. You can maybe feel it a bit more. It is more pushed into the first one made loads of money, so now we have to make loads of money off this one to then keep making loads of them. And then it done, I think, quite all right. And then obviously the merger and stuff happened and the pandemic, and then even like the SAG strike. And then you've got like, suddenly we're 6 years after Deadpool 2 and the sequel's finally coming out. But no,
had we not had any delays, or again the world hadn't been the world that we sadly have lived in for the last 6 years, when do you think the turnaround would have been in another timeline? How would we be on Deadpool 5? Would we be on Deadpool 7?
The third one, I reckon they could have got out by 2020, maybe 2021, had nothing else happened. And then you'd now be gearing up for a team up or crossover into the MCU if that stuff had still happened, if they still bought them. So, like, there would have definitely, Deadpool would have carried on going. If it was in Deadpool films or X-Force films, like, there would have been films where he's the main guy. Obviously, like, having him in the MCU, if you're going to then cross him over into the 12A region, is it like Quicksilver and you have to give him that moment where he talks to the camera and swears like an absolute prick? Like, you can't then neuter him down, because when they would do it in the comics and he would cross over, they tend to sort of tone him down a bit. In terms of, something to compare it to, it's like Captain Jack in Torchwood is a completely different character to the version you see in Doctor Who. Like, they've obviously toned down the more adult character for the family stuff kind of thing. So I'm hoping that Deadpool Wolverine does well enough that he can stay in that bit. Like, he can sometimes play in the sandbox. Like, maybe he's one of the guys that show up in Secret Wars and he gets to just be himself. You don't have to sort of have him like, look, and there he is, and we couldn't actually let Ryan Reynolds speak because we've only got 3 swear words in a 12A kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you get unlimited in 12A. I think you can say shit whenever you want, and you get one fuck, I think. So
yeah, it's definitely the one fuck rule. That's the thing. That's the one fuck rule.
There's a title.
The one fuck rule. Starring Peachy.
Hello, Mr. Batman. Bruce, how Alfred Pennyworth, mate? Haven't been talking to the cops, have you, mate? I do these whole. It was nice to sort of revisit this trilogy loosely, in terms of the last time we saw these characters in, anticipation for Deadpool and Wolverine, which we will obviously both be seeing relatively as close, I think, as possible to the release date, which is the 26th, Friday the 26th of July.
Yeah, so I think, I think general release is Thursday the 25th. I think in some previews is out on the 24th, but I'm like 90% certain, unless Cineworld have fucking scanned the tickets and done a reverse on me, I'm sure the midnight release is Thursday the 25th at 0.5. So I'll be there the 24th evening going into the morning of the 25th.
Nice. So you can obviously, hopefully, I think you should do your TikTok reaction. Maybe like try and keep it spoiler free, and then we'll spoiler fill it when I'm back from holiday. Because as this is out, as you are seeing it, it will be Deadpool and Wolverine will be in the cinema. I will just be back in the country. So by the time next Friday rolls around, when we actually get to talk about it, more people will have seen it.
It's not to cut you off. I'm not trying to steal your thunder. I'm trying to praise you here. I'm the one that gets to go and see movies late because I'm the one with like really about life, and I'm trying to do it for you guys. but he's the one that's going off to LA. He's the one that's actually going to go and meet Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. I'm the one that has to just be the audience and then go see the movie. But then he's the one that's actually, for all I know, going to the red carpet, and he didn't invite me.
I absolutely wish. The goal of this channel, and especially like the TikTok and stuff, is to get to the point where like we're like Straw Hat Goofy and we get invited to the premieres of these kind of things. We will get there, Connor. It might be 7, but we'll be there.
When we do, we have to dress up as a straw hat and a goofy. That's our costume.
Do you watch Straw Hat Goofy? He is really good. Like he's one of the earlier sort of like TikTok film reviewers that I'm like, yeah, he's fucking all right. He's better than Soups, but you know, the less said about him, the better. But in terms of that, like, what are you guys looking forward to for Deadpool and Wolverine? Connor will have already told you in the real world what's happened because he'll have seen it. Ooh. Final predictions. Who's going to be a surprise cameo that we've not seen yet? I'm going to go for a Magneto of some kind. I think Fassbender.
My heart and soul would melt if it was Michael Fassbender. I don't think it will happen though. On the spot, I don't know, but I would like Quicksilver Scott, which I don't know, something random like that. If you're gonna do well, we don't know Professor X is even in the movie because Cassandra Nova, without going into it, but essentially is like the evil cousin of Professor X,
the evil twin sister.
They're definitely going to allude to Patrick Stewart not being on set. And hang on, he's had a sex change. We're definitely going to get Professor X jokes. So then there's surely got to be a joke that can go further with a Magneto appearance. But who it can be, I'm not bothered with either. Or if it's something completely out of left field, I would be more the merrier for it. But
so is Magneto your golden snitch? Is Magneto the one that you would be like, fuck, I don't care how shit the movie is, it had a Magneto in it?
Yeah, no, it would be a Magneto, or both, somehow. Yeah, Magneto. He would be the Holy Grail. He'd be the Holy Grail.
That's a good one. I would love to see a Magneto in some capacity, whether it be McKellen or Fassbender. I think we will see a Professor X. Like both of them have said they can't say whether it like they're in it or not, and there's that whole thing. At some point in Secret Wars, we're gonna have literally everyone back. Do you know who I'd love to see? I would love to see like an Ang Lee Hulk or like a Nick Cage Ghost Rider thing. If we're gonna do this whole like mind meldy shit, like whether it stock footage isn't preferable, but I'll take it. But if we get like a new Nicolas Cage Johnny Blaze scene, then I'm like, fucking, let's go.
Oh,
with his CGI abs and his wig, bring it to me.
Bring it to me. Crazy.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking for like, oh, it's going to save the MCU. It's not, because the MCU is what it is at this point. It, you know, they churned out a lot of stuff because we had a big backlog, which we've always said that was the detriment of, you had 3, 4, 5 films that had already been done and pandemic had hit, so that everything had closed up, the series and that. They've got the right people making actual television series now for the Marvel television branch of it. So that's I think getting better already. The film output, it's nice that we've had this big break, and like Deadpool and Wolverine is the only MCU film this year. And I think that is good to be the breather, palate cleanse, and we're just going for phase 5 and we're just enjoying it. And whether it links to sequels or spin-offs or like more cameos, I don't want to just like debate cameos like Doctor Strange, because that film is good on its own, and everyone overlapped it. I thought it was shit.
Yeah. What will be? Yeah.
Where can the good people find us, Connor, if they've not done so already?
YouTube. I mean, congratulations, you somehow found YouTube. Maybe someone sent you a dodgy link that then led to us. We're not dodgy, by the way. You guys should know how social media works. We're on TikTok, for God's sake. But, you know, Facebook, X, Instagram, you know, without making this really long, you know, Facebook, X, TikTok, you can find us on MSN, WhatsApp, maybe Facebook Messenger if we're lucky. Reels on Instagram when we get a bit more viral, when you're scrolling on your phone, you'll be like, oh, look, it's us. You know, share us, rate us, comment us, send us an email to nerdbiblecontacts@gmail.com. Let us, don't spoil it for us, but let us know your dream cameo team of what you would like to see in Deadpool Wolverine. Yeah, if the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants is pretty much confirmed, give us a team to fight them. Let us know who you would want to see in it and why, and send in a request. And maybe the higher powers of the barnyard, that is the set of Pace Sheet, maybe we can do something to make it happen. We can put in a couple calls, without promising anything. Maybe we can do something for you, and you only, you, the audience.
And until then, we will see you guys next week. Let us know your thoughts on Deadpool and Wolverine for our review of it next episode. And until then, goodbye.
Stay tasty, y'all.